So when it comes to Mario villains, most people would immediately think of Bowser, and there's a good reason for that. Mario and Bowser's rivalry has lasted nearly 40 years, and is without a doubt the most recognizable hero-villain matchup in gaming history. However, Bowser is by no means a deep villain. He's just an evil king who wants to conquer the Mushroom Kingdom, and most people are fine with that. A villain doesn't necessarily need to be deep in order to be good, and at this point, it would be kinda weird if Nintendo suddenly tacks on a backstory or something for Bowser that's supposed to make you sympathize with him. However, even with everyone being fine with Bowser's simplicity, the formula is bound to grow stale after a while, which is why Bowser isn't the only Mario villain, with most of the others being in the Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi games. And although these villains are entertaining in their own right, they hardly have more depth than Bowser. Their plans might be more complex, but they don't often have deeper motives than, "I want to rule the world," or something like that. Again, there's nothing wrong with this, but with all of these villains who have pretty much the same motivation, you'd think that the Mario franchise would be totally devoid of deep and complex villains, right? Well, not quite. For today's topic of discussion, we venture back to 2007, when Nintendo released Super Paper Mario, along with the man who is by far the most interesting and thought-provoking villain in Mario history. You saw the title of this video, you saw the thumbnail, it's time to talk about Count Bleck. But before we get too far into it, if you liked this video, make sure to subscribe. Around 98% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed, and that makes me sad. But without further ado, let's get back to the subject of this video. At first glance, Count Bleck doesn't seem too different from most other Mario villains. He kidnaps Peach, has a group of quirky minions, and despite his rather fancy look and demeanor, he has his own set of funny quirks as well. In this case, he loves referring to himself in the third person. Now, one thing I immediately appreciate about Count Bleck is that his goal is made clear from the beginning. Using the power of the Chaos Heart, he tears open an all-consuming void, which he plans to use to, quote, destroy all worlds. It's nice to get that out of the way, but the question still remains. Why? Why would anyone want to destroy all worlds? His minions interpret this goal as a method for him to build his own perfect world in place of the others, but he never outright confirms this to any of them. While he says that he'll grant their wishes, all he states to be his goal is the destruction of all worlds, hinting that there might be a disconnect between him and his minions. It's never a good sign if a minion has to ask the main villain for reassurance if the plan is still in place, and boy is that relevant here. And while we're on the topic, I think it's worth pointing out the dynamic Count Bleck has with his minions. For a villain like this, you'd expect Count Bleck to have a zero-tolerance failure policy, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Whenever someone comes back having been beaten by Mario and company, Count Bleck hardly seems to care. He doesn't have them beg for forgiveness, he doesn't discard them, and he doesn't even punish them. It's actually his assistant Nastasia who does all that stuff, as she's more upset at the idea of failing Bleck than Bleck himself. Because of situations like this, I think it's clear that unlike most villains who see their henchmen as expendable tools, Count Bleck holds some level of respect for his minions. He calls them by their names, he reassures them that the plan is still in motion, and most importantly, doesn't demand their undying service. One of the most important scenes in the game for me was when Nastasia first expresses doubt in Count Bleck's plan. Not only does he not just kill her, as a lot of villains would do just for asking that, but he even gives her the opportunity to leave, to abandon their cause without consequence, with his blessing even. But why would he do that? Don't we need to play up how evil this guy is? Well, not really, because while there are some small hints of it earlier, this is the first moment where it's emphasized that Count Bleck may not be as evil as his darkness-loving, monocle-wearing persona implies. But why is this the case? Why make a character who just looks so stereotypically evil, but turns out that he's not rotten to the core? Well, to understand that, I think it's time to talk about his backstory. In addition to Count Bleck's group meetings, another bit of story we get between chapters is the love story of two characters named Blumiere and Timpani, who, I'll just cut to the chase, are revealed to be Count Bleck and Tippy, the pixel who assists Mario throughout the game. Through these backstories, we find that Count Bleck was initially part of a race known as the Tribe of Darkness, and after falling off a cliff, he meets Timpani, a human who nurses him back to health. A somewhat typical forbidden lovers story starts, except this time, there's only one family that disapproves, and oh does that turn out to be important later. So Blumiere quickly falls in love with Timpani, and fearing severe punishment from his father, the two run away to live their lives in peace, and they lived happily ever after until they didn't. Bleck's father finds out about their new life and banishes Timpani to another dimension. Needless to say, Bleck is not happy, and calls upon the power of the Dark Prognosticus, a tome that he carries with him throughout the game, which at this point is revealed to be a forbidden artifact of the Tribe of Darkness. It's at this point that we truly learn who Count Bleck is. He's a man who not only lost everything, but lost everything twice. First, he gave up everything in his life to be with Timpani, only to have his new everything then stripped away because his dad was being a scumbag. Count Bleck is not a bad person, but rather a miserable, grieving man who just wants to see his wife again. And since he believes that's impossible, the only way to relieve his pain must be to have everyone share in it. No one knows this more than Nastasia, who's shown throughout the game frequently trying to convince Count Bleck to see reason. She's not even trying to be subtle about it either, outright telling him that it's a bad idea and that everything needs to stop. She even brings up the topic of Timpani, and that's when I thought Bleck would violently lash out, but instead he just politely tells her to stop. Even when she talks about him losing everything, he has too much respect for her to physically or mentally hurt her, or even yell at her. It's also around this point where Count Bleck implies that he knows that this is all a bad idea, and the only reason he's pressing on is because he believes it's too late to turn back. It's at this point where I believe that these character moments aren't just to show off how Count Bleck's plan falls apart, but also to show off just how good of a person Bleck really is. Even after losing everything twice, and being under the influence of both the Dark Prognosticus and the Chaos Heart, there are still very noticeable shreds of humanity within him. I love how throughout the game they refer to Mario and company, the people who are trying to defeat them, as, quote, the heroes. Usually when you have a villain like this, they believe that they are the heroes, as they believe what they're doing is right. But not here. By calling his enemies heroes, Count Bleck is acknowledging that he is the bad guy, and it starts to make sense why he doesn't punish his minions when they fail to stop the heroes. It's because he wants the heroes to defeat him. He doesn't really want all worlds to be destroyed. The only reason why that even came up for him is because in a moment of grief, he turned to dark powers that he didn't understand in hopes for salvation. And as soon as he opened the void, he realized that, but also knew he couldn't do anything to stop it, so chose to advance in hopes that maybe it could ease his sorrows just a little bit. But as we see as the game goes on, it won't. I love Count Bleck because he's a direct counter to a common trope that I hate. Something I've seen a lot of media do is that they'll have this super evil villain who's been dead set in their ways for years, but then the main character comes along and gives a single motivational speech which changes their mind. Because we gotta show off how noble and persuasive the hero is, right? No. No, you shouldn't. That's stupid and unrealistic. If you have someone who's held a certain set of ideals for a long time, you're not going to make them shed those ideals with one speech, regardless of how persuasive and charismatic it is. But we don't have to worry about that with Count Bleck, because the cracks in his resolve are there from the start, and the main source of persuasion doesn't come from the hero, it comes from the villain's own assistant, who, unlike the heroes, who've only met Bleck for a couple minutes each, Nastasia knows everything Count Bleck has been through, and she knows that there's good in him because she's seen it before. And while she makes visible progress in having Bleck see the error of his ways, they both know that there is only one way this can end. Once he's defeated by Mario and company, Count Bleck praises their strength, and is clearly grateful that they were able to stop him. He then gives them one final task, to finish him off. And once that's done, everything will be undone. The void, the Chaos Heart, it will all vanish. But before that happens...
I knew you going soft. Dinner's gonna be cold tonight, asshole!
So I've heard some mixed opinions on Dimentio being the actual final boss of the game. Some people have said that he totally steals the spotlight of Count Bleck just to have a villain who's more evil, while others have said he's a well set up twist villain who fits into the story well. Now I won't go too far into this, as that's a topic for a whole other video, but I lean more into the latter side, not only because both the figurative and literal seeds of his deceit are planted throughout the game, but I also think Dimentio serves as the embodiment of the consequences of Count Bleck's actions. As mentioned earlier, Count Bleck was shown promising his minions a perfect world, which turned out to be a lie. While Mimi and O'Chunks forgave him, as they simply held a lot of respect for the man, Dimentio took it personally, and decided that since Bleck chickened out, he'd do it himself. We see this devilishly evil clown manipulate both the heroes and villains across the game. He lets Bleck summon the Chaos Heart, shows the heroes the path they need to go on, and even lets them defeat his so-called master. All he has to do in the end is swoop in and grab the Chaos Heart to create his perfect world, even leaving behind a shred of his power to control the Chaos Heart once he's defeated. It's at this point that Count Bleck realizes there's only one thing left to do. While everyone was manipulated by Dimentio, it was Bleck reading the Dark Prognosticus and summoning the Chaos Heart that set everything into motion. This all started because of him, and he now knows that he's the only one who can end it. And so, with the help of Timpani, his one true love, they're able to banish the Chaos Heart by giving up their own life force, ending everything once and for all. While it may come across as a typical tragic romance story, there's actually way more to Count Bleck than just that. He serves as an allegory for what can happen when a loved one is lost. It's not unheard of for someone to be so shaken by the loss of someone close to them that they'll resort to extreme actions, both physically and mentally. And while it's impossible to truly get over the loss of a loved one, it's important to not let that loss define who we are, and that we need to look to the future instead of the past. Count Bleck is an excellent example of someone letting loss define him. He's so blinded by the past that he can't see the future or even the present. He can't see the fact that while Timpani may be gone, he's still been able to make new friends who love and respect him. And while they'll never truly be what Timpani was to him, he can still find happiness with them if he just tried. Unfortunately, by the time he realizes this, it's too late. And while he may have regained his true love, he's also lost so much more. We can only hope that wherever he is, he's finally happy.